Hello and welcome back to episode 14 of Macabre Matinee with Craig and Sean. As always, I am Craig Lance.
And I'm Sean, bearded capelid.
Yeah, so it's time for our weekly spoiler warning. We are going to be discussing A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. So if you haven't seen it, press pause, go watch that movie, come back, because we don't, and finish listening to us. We don't want to hear any complaints that we spoiled the movie for you that's almost, 40 years old at this point.
Right.
But just in case you haven't seen it, now's your chance for your one and only spoiler warning.
That's right.
So, as I said, we are going to discuss A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, or as I like to call it, My Nightmare. Re- Released in 1985. It was written by David Chaskin and directed by Jack Shoulder. Uh, it stars, or kind of stars, horror movie and Western icon Clu Gulager as Mr. Walsh. You and I actually had the pleasure of meeting Clu and working quite
Yeah.
close to him for a weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Um,
I almost, I'm not going to lie. As soon as you said that, I remembered that.
yeah, he actually has signed my box set of Nightmare on Elm Street
Oh, very nice.
DVDs. Yeah. Also stars Mark Patton as Jesse, Kim Myers as Lisa, Robert Russler as Grady. There is a cameo by Lyman Ward, who plays Grady's father, and you might recognize him as Ferris Bueller's father. And also
Oh,
Robert
yeah.
England is back as Freddy. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting, right?
Yeah, no,
I
not didn't even catch that, to be honest. Very nice.
yeah, when I saw him, I'm like, that dude's familiar, so I had to go look it up.
Right.
So the story in this movie is that it begins on a school bus, and you will notice pretty quickly that Robert England is the bus driver. And as the bus empties, leaving only two really annoying random girls and Jesse on the bus, it turns yeah, it turns into a literal nightmare as has taken over and is taking them into his dream world hellscape. Just as Freddy is about to kill one of the girls, Jesse wakes up, alerting his family to his nightmare and to ours. In the first of some fairly quick sequences that jump back and forth between night and day, this movie does it like you have one scene in the day and then one scene at night, and it does it repeatedly throughout the movie.
Oh, yeah,
I
for sure.
guess, yeah, I guess to give you kind of an idea that time's passing. Um, so, anyways, later that day, Jesse learns from his soon to be friend that he had spent the day fighting with, Grady, that he is now living in Nancy's old house. And Grady gives Jesse some urban legend type background on the house, some things that happened in the previous movie. Nancy witnessing her boyfriend getting slaughtered across the street, going crazy when, and her mom killing herself in the living room, which two of those things never happened, but you know how urban legends go.
Right, right.
Uh, so that night when Jesse dreams, Freddy comes to Jesse and tells him that he needs him, and that he being Jesse has the body and Freddy has the brains. Next day, while Jesse is putting together his room, Lisa shows up and helps, and they find Nancy's diary and start to learn about Freddy. That night, while dreaming, yes, again, this is how quick this movie is paced.
Yeah. No,
That
yeah.
night, while
This,
dreaming,
yeah. Sorry, I was just gonna jump. Yeah,
no,
that. This is for a movie that really tried to kind of like change and expand upon like what Freddy can do. It's just rapid and no real explanation.
yeah, really isn't. So uh, that night, while he's dreaming, Jesse finds Freddy's glove in the basement boiler, exactly where Nancy and her mom and everybody else has left it. Um, Freddy tells Jesse to try it out and puts the glove on Jesse, then tells Jesse to go kill for him. The next night before bed, Jesse and his family are discussing how hot their house is, and the birds go crazy. One of them killing the other, and then attacking the dad before finally spontaneously combusting.
As birds do.
Yeah. Later that night, Jesse awakens to another apparent nightmare. He begins walking down the street in the rain, eventually ending up at a bar that can't decide if it is a gay bar, a biker bar, an 80s punk bar, or a drag bar.
I think the answer
Uh,
is yes.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. As he begins to drink a beer, his coach shows up and apparently has authority over what Jesse does off campus and
Right.
punishes him by taking him back to the school to make him run laps in the gym. When he's done, he tells Jesse to take a shower, and while Jesse is showering, the coach is attacked by all the balls, which I am quite positive is an allegory to something, since he never seems to freak out and just keeps chomping his gum. The jump ropes then wrap themselves around his arms, drag him to the showers. His clothes are ripped off, and he is whipped by a towel before being killed by Freddy question mark, except it isn't Freddy, it is Jesse with Freddy's glove. Um, the police bring Freddy home. I'm sorry, the police bring Jesse home.
Yeah.
Maybe Freddy, who knows? As he's been wandering around the town naked, his parents now believe he is crazy and or on drugs. Um, the next day at school, they find out that the coach was killed in the shower, and Jesse begins to believe he is actually killing for Freddy. Lisa, who has been researching Freddy after reading about him in Nancy's diary, takes Jesse to the now shut down power plant that Freddy used to work at. She believes that Jesse has a psychic connection to Freddy and that being there will reveal some secrets. However, nothing happens other than Lisa being scared of mice. That that weekend, Lisa has a pool party at her house. Jesse continues to descend into madness. As Lisa tries to comfort Jesse, they begin making out. He freaks out as he starts to turn into Freddy and leaves Lisa and runs to Grady's house, where he asks Grady for help.
I mean, as you do,
Because, yeah.
because because there is no
Yeah,
subtext in this movie whatsoever.
none at all. Grady finally gives in and asks what he has to do. And of course, what he has to do is stay awake and keep an eye on Jesse just in case things start to happen. However, Grady gets bored with this and goes to sleep, and Freddy kills him.
Yeah.
And when Freddy dies, uh, but when he dies, we realize it is Freddy manipulating Jesse and that Jesse is now wearing the glove. Jesse hears the police coming and escapes out the window, returning to the pool party because some reason his idea of what to do is to go back to where there are lots of kids to kill.
Hey, I mean, more distractions. He can just.
So he explains to Lisa what is going on, but as she tells him that she had read in Nancy's diary that the best way to fight or to win is to actually fight Freddy. He tells her he can't do it, he's not strong enough, and he collapses. And as she's urging him on to continue to fight Freddy, Freddy stands up and chases her through the house. She stabs him, but nothing happens because rules no longer apply in this world. Jesse is apparently fighting Freddy internally because Freddy just disappears. And then he reappears outside at the pool where he begins killing kids all willy nilly while they are wide awake, which is a new power that Freddy has apparently. And
Yeah.
at one point tells the kids they are all his children now. When Lisa's dad tries to shoot Freddy, he leaves. Uh, Apparently, catching the bushes on fire is also a thing, as he can manipulate hot and cold and things like that now too.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure, sure.
why not? Lisa realizes he must have went back to the power plant. I don't know how she realizes that, but she does. And when she gets to the power plant, it is all lit up and guarded by two dogs with human-like faces.
Because of
um,
course they do.
yeah, because apparently Freddy can now manipulate the real world the same as he does the nightmare world. So she finally finds Freddy, and as they fight, she tells him that she isn't scared of him and that she loves Jesse. Freddy assures her that Jesse will die with him, and eventually the plant catches on fire, burning Freddy up, but leaving Jesse alive under the burned out husk of Freddy. Lisa cries and hugs Jesse. There is a return scene to the bus, but you know it's crap from the beginning because Jesse has a car and wouldn't be riding the bus. So things happen and silly cliffhanger that doesn't matter because this movie is essentially ignored by the rest of the series.
Absolutely.
And for good reason.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, it's crazy to think that the franchise kept going after this, but it was well received when was
yeah.
released. Where there was just more Freddy hype, you're just ready for that a follow up to that amazing movie, or I don't know at the time. And I can say even myself, I remember liking this movie better back in the day, but watching it
Yeah.
now, yeah, not so much.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but this movie once again saved New Line Cinema.
Wow.
They, yeah, they were about to go under again, and once again, the success of this movie, both in the theater and in video sales, was what kept New Line Cinema going.
Hey, I mean,
So,
good for
yeah,
that. That's good. At least it made the money it was supposed to. It was designed to. It didn't put them under. But it's just
yeah,
a very inferior sequel.
yeah. Well, to me, this movie just can't decide what it wants to do.
Right.
Is it a slasher movie? Is it a haunted house movie? Is it a possession movie like the Amityville horror movies? Um,
Right.
I think that they really wanted to go with the possession slash haunted house theme of this movie, uh, but then they realized that they needed Freddy, and so they brought Robert England in to throw him into like I think I read he's in less than 13 minutes of the total scenes of this movie.
Right. Because it's I mean, they let Jesse pretty much being him. I think that was a way to kind of to originally get around the idea of Freddy. Because I believe it was like either he wasn't going to be included or at least not as much, like as little as they were here, because they wanted to recast Robert England because he asked for more money,
Yeah,
and they were like, "Nah, we don't." Clearly, they didn't feel they needed him, and then they, after about 2 weeks of shooting, they realized their mistake, and
yeah,
and gave the man his money. But
yeah. You know, concessions were made, and they paid him.
yeah, for sure. And this one, like I said, the big problem is this. All right, we already made mention of it, and yeah, there over in the later years of this film, it became a bit more apparent as the world became more open to or I ain't gonna say accepting because the Lord knows it's still not fully accepted, but embracing homosexuality. And
Yeah,
like in the recent years, I've read comments where people still think they're reading too much into it, and there are some parts like yeah maybe, but even the writer has since come out saying that like yeah, I intentionally put these undertones in the story. We have a lead character who is openly gay actor, and like you said, the little subtext of what was in there, it's kind of like people going finding out that Hellraiser was all about the writer's BDSM fetish. Like what?
right. Well, there's particularly the scene when he goes to Grady's house, and
Yeah,
not the fact that he goes to his friend's house as opposed to having his girlfriend help him,
right,
but the fact that he goes to his friend's house, and when he's talking to him, the whole thing actually sounds like a closeted dude coming out. The
right.
whole sequence of conversation there, and not that that's an issue at all, but it is a thing that needs to be pointed out.
Yeah,
That it's
yeah. It's
yeah, or
perfect.
should be pointed out. Yeah, the writer I think said that he wanted it in there because it created some more drama.
Right.
The subtext, and I think it succeeded on some levels there.
It for sure it's made people remember this movie more. I honestly believe that. It because like once people realize that, 'cause like you said, this movie is forgotten about by the rest of the franchise. And for the most part, most fans didn't really talk about it much. But then once that kind of like became more apparent in the people's minds, it made it stand out a bit more. As well as like you said, like the writer acknowledging it and the actor being he happily when he goes to cons apparently refers to himself as the only male scream queen because because Jesse really is put in the part of the traditional role of usually the damsel in distress, the woman being haunted or being stalked by the killer. That's
Yeah,
traditionally the female role in the movies, and this one flipped that 100%
it did.
to
It,
where
it so
oh, go ahead.
yeah, this movie tried conceptually to do a lot of things,
Right,
and I think that had it stuck with its guns because conceptually it makes some sense that Nancy had got the better of Freddy. She told them that she no longer feared him. He was destroyed.
right,
And conceptually, this makes sense that in order for Freddy to come back, he has to find a way into the world again
yeah,
through kids that don't know who he is. And so he does that by basically haunting his glove that is still in their house.
right. And that's like again, like you said, conceptually, that's a good plot. That's a good way to bring it back in. Unfortunately, what they actually did, because correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm reading in too much, like Freddy is literally manipulating the reality, the woken
Yeah,
world. Why does
yeah,
he need Jesse?
that's
What
right.
what what benefit is it getting a body? And like it's just some might look at us and be like, well, you're trying to find logic in a horror movie. You know what? Fuck you. There's only so much I can I can let it slide because like I get it if he can literally do nothing, if he doesn't exist. Now, granted, yeah, maybe the moments where clearly he manipulated Jesse into doing things, but that wasn't Jesse making the tennis balls attack the coach or the jump rope
Yeah,
wrap him up. So there was
yeah.
no
And
there
the
was
whole swimming pool scene.
yeah
Yeah,
there's literally no reason for what he was doing.
yeah.
So
Well, so the
yeah,
whole thing was is if the swimming pool scene, if they have everybody looking, like the audience, the viewers,
right,
us, we see Freddy, but then the kids see Jesse,
right,
that would have been something different. That would have been, hey, he's having to use this kid to do it.
and
But there
yeah,
is clearly a scene where Freddy emerges from with inside Jesse,
yeah.
but then somehow Jesse is still inside Freddy. Again, this movie makes no sense in what it does. The narrative jumps all over the place.
Yeah, and that's
It
the big problem too is not only is it something different, it just feels like it threw everything established in the first movie out the window because they had their own idea. And maybe
well, Robert
yeah,
England even says the same thing. He says this is his least favorite. He hated the pool scene. He had
right,
a hard time acting the pool scene because it made no sense to the rules that they had previously set up.
right.
Um, and they were on such a tight schedule for this movie. I think that was a large part of it because the previous year, part one had been released on November 1st, and they were shooting for the same release day
Oh,
the
okay.
following year. They
Right.
didn't even have a script written or anything like that. And I guess because New Line Cinema was in such bad shape financially that it was micromanaged from the upper tier
Right.
at New Line, and he kept just showing up on set and directing
Oh,
the
wow.
actors. Yeah, like there was. Yeah, it was very tense. Apparently, it was a bad work situation. It was a lot of long hours, and you can tell that like I said, the pacing's wrong, the narrative's wrong, the movie doesn't fit in already established rules of this series, which I realize we're only two movies in and you could have changed it,
Right.
but you have to give a reason why you're changing it
Yeah.
and then stick to those rules. because you didn't understand, like, probably 75% of the time I didn't know if Jesse was dreaming or awake
No, and
when he's dealing with Freddy.
yeah, and that's the thing is, other than like to the top of my head, the school bus clearly a dream. But
Yes,
I would say it's about 70% of those. Whenever he's talking to Freddy, he's fully awake,
it
and
feels that way.
which can work if it was established that Freddy can haunt people outside their dreams, with only one movie to go off of that clearly, cementedly, I know I just made that word up, defined
No, it works.
Freddy's powers as a dream demon of sorts. That
Yeah.
that's it. And to just change it, like you said, without explanation, without giving a reason, it's just like, oh,
Well,
he
the
could do it now.
the three main rules that were set up in the first movie were Freddy acts within his in the dream world. He can manipulate it completely. If you die in the dream world, you're dead in life.
Right.
That's rule number one. Rule number two is that wow, I totally lost my train of thought.
Oh.
Rule number rule number two is that you can bring Freddy back from the other side.
Right.
And rule number three is that once you quit being scared of Freddy, he has no power over you. Those are the three rules that are clearly established in the first movie. And to just throw them completely out without explanation, like I said, if they had elaborated on it and then followed their own rules, I think it would have been fine, because this movie would have worked as an Amityville horror type movie.
Right. Like, and again, I think with maybe less rushed production, less interference from the offices, as it were, it may have
Yeah.
had potential. And again, with the subtext being a bit ahead of its time, even that, if it had been embraced more, may have helped it be a bit better. Which again, though, the subtext has made people, I think, appreciate this film a bit more. Even though it's not blatant, you kind of like,
Yeah.
with some people, representation, you take what you can get, and without
Yeah.
saying it, this is a gay lead in a horror film.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, I mean, there's some really great stuff that happens too. I don't want to just, I mean, the fact that you have a male lead essentially in the role of the female lead
Right.
of a horror movie, that was groundbreaking at the time.
Yeah.
Even still today, you don't see that very often.
Oh no, not that I can. Yeah, not that top of my head, honestly. No, yeah, I
Yeah.
know. I know we don't want to just harp on the negativity of it,
No, I mean,
but
there's a lot of negativity in this movie. I mean, there's
unfortunately,
a yeah. And it's not harping; it's just being honest about the take on the movie. Now, having said that, I think the production value of this movie is fairly good.
yeah, yeah.
Um, the horror scenes, even though there aren't many, aren't bad. Um, there's really there's really not a whole lot of intense scenes in this movie.
Now there is some, like I said, creepy images, like the dogs with the human
Yeah,
faces. Some of the dreams. Jesse being very sweaty was also
that was a thing. Yeah,
like I was looking at him in the first opening when he's on the bus.
yeah.
I'm like, is this the same dude from the later in the movie? Like,
Yeah,
because
they intentionally made him look bad in that sequence, I think, because
yeah,
of they wanted him to look like the sweaty, dirty kid that no one would talk to, because it was his nightmare that they had just moved to the town, no
right.
one liked him, blah blah blah. I think that's what they were trying to do there.
Hey,
But
it
yeah,
worked. I didn't even like for a second. I was like, if I remember what he looked like different from this,
his his hair was so dirty and greasy in that scene, it almost looked black. And he
right?
has white.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has very blonde hair.
But beyond that,
Uh,
and like I think Jesse's, he's not the best actor, but I thought he did a very good job of being the, as he put it, the scream queen for this film.
I actually thought the acting in this movie was better than the first movie,
Oh,
outside of a couple of performances from the first movie. I think overall the cast did a very good job in this movie for a horror movie.
of course.
Rated, yeah.
And how they found the I can't remember her name right now, the love interest How
Lisa.
Lisa, how they found Meryl Streep's long lost daughter is pretty impressive. Like she looks like a young Meryl Streep. It
Now
was.
that you say it, I kept going, what else have I seen her in? And then she's in a Hellraiser movie,
Oh, okay.
but uh, I don't think she has a large part in that movie. But I kept going, what else have I seen her in? But that must be it, that it's the resemblance to Meryl Streep, because she does look a bit like her. She did really solid in this
Yeah,
movie.
absolutely. And
Grady, I thought, was really solid in this movie too for the parts he had.
right, and like I said, overall, I was really going to give it to Jesse and her, but yeah, overall, like yeah, definitely better. They definitely got a little more seasoned actors, even though I'm not sure if all of them had really been acting much, but like yeah, because like as much as like as iconic of a person as Johnny Depp is, his first movie is not going to be his strongest performance in the
No,
last one.
no.
But yeah, overall, like you said, production. There is some creepy moments. Not great on the kill list, even though I did pick one for the movie. But
I did as well. Um, One thing before we get there,
yeah.
though, is I don't know if you noticed this, but they did not use the typical Nightmare on Elm Street score that they use throughout all the rest of the series.
Oh,
So I don't know if
yeah.
that was a production thing or not. Like they didn't want to pay the guy to keep using his music or
Right.
whatever, but they did not. And apparently it was input into a foreign video release,
Huh.
and of course it was changed, or I'm sorry, it was put into a foreign um, theatrical release, but when it went to home video it was replaced with the I think it was a Bob Dylan song that they had at the end of it.
Oh, wow.
But yeah,
Okay.
they removed the Nightmare on Elm Street theme from this movie, which is kind of random. And they said, I was looking this up as well, in Germany, to get a nice enough or a good enough rating to get people to go see this, that even though this movie is very light on gore, they actually cut all of it out, about 6 or 7 minutes worth of footage out of the movie,
Oh, wow.
and it's pretty much damn near unwatchable, is my understanding.
I can imagine.
Which,
I can imagine.
yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I thought that was interesting that they chopped it up so bad in Germany that it's pretty much just damn near unwatchable.
Right.
So you said you had a kill of the week. What was yours?
Um, I have the kill is wow, and I didn't write down who it was. Where Freddy he stabbed. I'm sorry, I'm not on my game today. He
Nah,
stabbed.
it's all good, brother.
It was he stabbed one of the teens through the door. Like you saw the claws come through the door and they slid down.
Yeah, that was Grady actually
Grady.
when he
Okay,
killed it. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, Grady's kill. I liked it because of you saw the parents see the claws come through the door, and then they also still kind of cut down into the door a little bit. That
Yeah.
that's literally all I can remember as far as any good like just that imagery was kind of cool. It wasn't very bloody, or anything, but like that's some good imagery for it. So I had to give it that one.
I went with the coach's kill just because it cracked me up.
Oh,
I mean, it the fact that they turn it to straight up an S&M bondage scene
right.
previous to getting killed, including the whipping, even though it was with towels.
Yeah, but I
Um,
had to
it
smack
was,
that ass.
yeah. So this one also, they moved from the, as we talked about last week, they moved the location to Ohio,
Oh, okay.
um, as far as where it takes place, but they did not change the California license plates. But if you notice, there's no palm trees in this one.
Right. Oh, wow.
Uh, yeah, we get the location where Freddy's all of the boiler scenes apparently were supposed to take place in the first movie, which
Oh,
is the power plant that she takes him to. That's supposed to be where all of the boiler stuff was happening. So you get a little bit more background. And like I said, if they had just spent a little bit more time saying, listen, Freddy can't, Freddy explaining to Jesse, I need you because no one remembers me or whatever,
right.
and just spent a little bit more of that, and then set their own rules and live by those rules,
Yeah.
I would have rated this movie a whole lot higher than I did, which we'll get to that in a second. But
Right. Yeah, I agree
uh,
with that though. Like even if it's just Freddy like cut a little monologue of like, I can't enter dreams in this state, and most I can do, is like I'm reduced to being a haunting ghost. You know what I mean? Like something to
yeah,
kind of give a little more into it, other than just like, well, this is what's happening, and accept it, fuckers.
yeah. Until kids start to fear me again, I can't come back, or something like that.
Right.
Which
Which,
they
yeah.
establish later in the movie is fine.
Right.
That
Right.
he need. Yeah, I mean, and that goes, if I'm not mistaken, all the way through to the Versus movie.
Yeah. I
That
mean,
he has to have kids that are scared of him for him to be able to manipulate.
yeah, absolutely. And that's why, like, which we'll be getting into it next week. With part three, I think is they really started establishing and keeping the lore from there on out.
Yeah, they kind of ignore the mess of this movie. I'm not saying they ignore everything that happens, but they kind of ignore the narrative mess and just kind of get back to actually what could be considered a direct sequel to the first movie.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Um, a kill count on this movie, I have no freaking idea, because I have no idea how many people he killed at the pool party.
Right.
Um, but outside of that, I think there was only two deaths outside of the pool party. There was Grady and the coach.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Because like
and then,
we saw him
yeah,
toss kids into the lake into the pool, which was smoking. So maybe there's something going on there. A few kids took a dive over like the barbecue pit, but we never saw any real clear deaths. So yeah, I think you're
the
right.
one kid gets his head stepped on, and he kills one he does get one kid at the party, but
Right.
we don't really have a clear cut idea as to how many kids died at the party.
Right.
And they did allude to the fact that the pool was getting hot. The
Mm,
water was heating up with
right.
his abilities to increase temperature now.
Right.
Um, so yeah, because they kept saying turn down the heat in the pool, and then it would start steaming, and then it was boiling, and people were falling into it. So we really have no idea how many people died.
Right.
So I could have probably done some research on the internet and got that information, but I feel like if it's so convoluted that you
Right.
can't actually do a count while you're watching the movie, it's probably not worth talking about. Um,
It's okay.
yeah, so I mean, overall, the movie's okay. The the plot's just it's just bad.
Yeah.
Um, it needed more intensity to it. It needed some more horror scenes. I mean, there's plenty of nightmare type scenes,
Yeah.
but nothing really happens in them.
Yeah, and
You
that's the big thing too. Was like we're used to the nightmare sequences being where it gets killed. So to flip it on its head and try something different, which again we said not different is fine as long as it works
right.
within the established continuity and has a good payoff. And this one, I don't think a lot of the scares and a lot of like what they were going for really paid off the way it was written.
Well, for instance, there's a scene in this movie where Freddy comes out of the boiler room, the basement boiler area,
Right.
and goes up the stairs into the bedroom, into Jesse's sister's bedroom, and basically tells her to wake up.
Yeah.
And then she goes, "Oh, what time is it?" And it flips over, and it's Jesse telling her to go back to bed. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
hey, there was no, that could have been intense. You could have had some. I know you don't want to have like a horror movie where you're literally chasing a 8-year-old kid or something in the movie, uh, but a few minutes of a scene there, maybe her parents break in and come in and break it up or something,
Right. Right.
which would only add to their illusions that he's on drugs or losing his mind.
No, for sure. It's like I said,
So
there was some definite potential in there, and I just don't. Whether they were worried about going too far or just not creative enough, they just didn't pull the trigger on some potential good scares and intense situations.
yeah, I certainly feel like this movie fell flat in a lot of areas, and I think it had to do with the rush production on it. And because, like I said, production quality's not bad. It had a lot of potential. It just didn't fulfill any of it. So I know this is a short review, but I don't want to just keep harping on this movie.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Unfortunately,
yeah, why don't we just go ahead and give our grades and
sure.
call it? What are your thoughts on it, Sean?
Again, with it having some decent production value, and you point out that the acting is good. Again, like what I had written down, it was 1 star. But like
Yeah.
so, talking with you and kind of like you reminded me of the highlights because I've had the better part of this week to just kind of sit on like, good lord, how terrible I was mad at this movie. But you know what?
It-
I'll give it a fair because, like you said, like there was solid attempts, there was solid like ideas that just didn't get executed very well. And I've seen far worse out there. So
yeah,
I'm gonna give it two. I'm gonna give it a 2 star.
I'm I'm gonna give it a two as well. I started at a 1.5.
Right.
I'm gonna give it a two as well. Like you said, in the horror genre, there are definitely worse movies out there. This is uh, I forget which one it was in the Friday the 13th movies that you could skip and it would
Oh,
absolutely not affect anything.
yeah.
This is that movie for this series,
Yeah,
in
Freddie
my
went to
opinion.
hell in this one.
Yeah, yeah. This is one that you can skip and has zero effect on future movies because, like I said, the next movie is a direct sequel to the first movie.
Right.
So watch it if you're a completist. Otherwise, you can totally skip it and go on to part three. And include Gulliger's in it, which is always worth watching.
Oh, again, yeah. It's just for like if you're wanting to see the saga of Freddy, this one's totally
Yeah,
skippable. But it's
yeah,
not. If it, I would say, I would be quicker to say skip Jason Goes to Hell than than this. I put Jason Goes to Hell below this one. That's way more skippable than this one would be.
I I will say this. I think the production value of this movie is better than Jason Goes to Hell.
Oh, for sure.
Um, what I will say about this movie is that I know a lot of. I'm not going to say a lot. I know some edgy friends
Hmm.
that rate this as their favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
I'm sure he does.
Yep, and you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, sir. And to each
Um,
their own. And again, we didn't like it. Maybe y'all will. Check it out. But
yeah,
by our advice,
let us.
it's skippable.
Yeah, yeah, definitely let us know if we're wrong on this. But
As always, let us know when
yeah,
we're wrong. We love to hear how wrong we are. But so yeah, so there you have it. We have a like not a great follow up to a movie that really like just blew audiences away, but it did enough to keep New Line going. So you got to give it its credit on that.
oh,
So,
and you did throw something else in there good before we sign off.
right,
There were a couple of really good one-liners in there from Freddie. It's not to the point of where it gets in the future, but
right.
there were a couple of pretty decent one-liners in there by Freddie.
Yeah, you did like you mentioned one of them in your breakdown. Yeah, I'll give it that
Yeah,
credit for it. Definitely, you have the body, I have the brains. That he peels back his skin to reveal his brain. That's like
yeah,
that is a good like you're starting to see which direction Freddy's eventually going to go with his
right.
one-liners and quips as he slaughters people. So yeah,
Yep.
we're still it's kicking it off what we'll eventually see down the road. But yeah, that's going to do it for today. Thank everybody who's listening to it. We appreciate each and every one of y'all. If you liked what you heard, give us a like. If you agreed or disagreed with us, leave us a comment down below to let us know what you thought about this movie. If were we being too harsh? Is there something we missed? Let us know. And of course, share the video around. And yeah, stay tuned for some more nightmares. We will catch y'all later.
See you next week.